Ascent Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents HBR Guide to Emotional Intelligence by Harvard Business Review. Narrated by Sellon-Wright. Publisher's note: this audiobook has bonus material. Please contact whomever you purchased this audiobook from to request the material.
What you'll learn. It's been 2 decades since Daniel Goleman's research showed that emotional intelligence is twice as important as other skills in determining outstanding leadership. By managing your emotions and relating well to others, he explained, you can achieve higher levels of influence as well as personal well-being. This kind of emotional intelligence is not just an innate trait. It can be learned. Becoming more finely attuned to your own emotions allows you to determine how to use those feelings more productively to make stronger decisions, overcome negative thoughts, control yourself in volatile situations, or understand others when they act in a way that surprises or angers you. Getting feedback from trusted colleagues and friends can keep you honest and aware of your areas of weakness, especially in the social sphere. And whether you're writing a difficult email, looking to keep your cool in a bitter negotiation, or managing an upset direct report, an array of frameworks and tactics can help you approach the situation in a way that takes the human element into account. This guide will help you navigate these approaches. You'll get better at identifying and managing your own emotions, persuading and influencing others, dealing with difficult colleagues, responding to stress productively, diffusing tense conversations, using your feelings as data to help you make smarter decisions, avoiding emotional pitfalls in a negotiation, reacting to tough situations with resilience, helping others on your team develop their emotional intelligence, developing a strong emotional culture. Section 1. What is emotional intelligence? Chapter 1. Leading by Feel. Like it or not, leaders need to manage the mood of their organizations. The most gifted leaders accomplish that by using a mysterious blend of psychological abilities known as emotional intelligence. They're self-aware and empathetic. They can read and regulate their own emotions while intuitively grasping how others feel and gauging their organization's emotional state. But where does emotional intelligence come from? And how do leaders learn to use it? The management literature, and even common sense, suggests that both nature and nurture feed emotional intelligence. Part genetic predisposition, part life experience, and part old-fashioned training, emotional intelligence emerges in varying degrees from one leader to the next, and managers apply it with varying skill. Wisely and compassionately deployed, emotional intelligence spurs leaders, their people, and their organizations to superior performance. Naively or maliciously applied, it can paralyze leaders or allow them to manipulate followers for personal gain. We invited 18 leaders and scholars, including business executives, leadership researchers, psychologists, a neurologist, a cult expert, and a symphony conductor, to explore the nature and management of emotional intelligence, its sources, uses, and abuses. Their responses differed dramatically, but there were some common themes: the importance of consciously and conscientiously honing one's skills, the double-edged nature of self-awareness, and the danger of letting any one emotional intelligence skill dominate. Here are some of their perspectives. Be realistic. John D. Mayer is a professor of psychology at the University of New Hampshire. He and Yale psychology professor Peter Salovey are credited with first defining the concept of emotional intelligence in the early 1990s. This is a time of growing realism about emotional intelligence, especially concerning what it is and what it isn't. The books and articles that have helped popularize the concept have defined it as a loose collection of personality traits, such as self-awareness, optimism, and tolerance. These popular definitions have been accompanied by exaggerated claims about the importance of emotional intelligence. But diverse personality traits, however admirable, don't necessarily add up to a single definition of emotional intelligence. In fact, such traits are difficult to collectively evaluate in a way that reveals their relationship to success in business and in life. Even when they're viewed in isolation, the characteristics commonly associated with emotional intelligence and success may be more complicated than they seem. For example, the scientific jury is out on how important self-awareness is to successful leadership. In fact, too much self-awareness can reduce self-esteem, which is often a crucial component of great leadership. From a scientific standpoint, emotional intelligence is the ability to accurately perceive your own and others' emotions, to understand the signals that emotions send about relationships, and to manage your own and others' emotions. It doesn't necessarily include the qualities, like optimism, initiative, and self-confidence, that some popular definitions ascribe to it. Researchers have used performance tests to measure people's accuracy at identifying and understanding emotions. For example, asking them to identify the emotions conveyed by a face, or which among several situations is most likely to bring about happiness. People who get high scores on these tests are indeed different from others. In the business world, they appear better able to deal with customers' complaints or to mediate disputes, and they may excel at making strong and positive personal connections with subordinates and customers over the long term. Of course, emotional intelligence isn't the only way to attain success as a leader. A brilliant strategist who can maximize profits may be able to hire and keep talented employees even if he or she doesn't have strong personal connections with them. Is there value in scales that, based on popular conceptions, measure qualities like optimism and self-confidence, but label them emotional intelligence? Certainly these personality traits are important in business, so measuring and sometimes enhancing them can be useful. But recent research makes it clear that these characteristics are distinct from emotional intelligence as it is scientifically defined. A person high in emotional intelligence may be realistic rather than optimistic and insecure rather than confident. Conversely, a person may be highly self-confident and optimistic, but lack emotional intelligence. The danger lies in assuming that because a person is optimistic or confident, they are also emotionally intelligent, when in fact the presence of those traits will tell you nothing of the sort. Never stop learning. Daniel Goleman is the co-chair of the Consortium for Research on Emotional Intelligence in Organizations based at Rutgers University's Graduate School of Applied and Professional Psychology in Piscataway, New Jersey. You can be a successful leader without much emotional intelligence if you're extremely lucky and you've got everything else going for you: booming markets, bumbling competitors, and clueless higher-ups. If you're incredibly smart, you can cover for an absence of emotional intelligence until things get tough for the business. But at that point, you won't have built up the social capital needed to pull the best out of people under tremendous pressure. The art of sustained leadership is getting others to produce superior work, and high IQ alone is insufficient to that task. The good news is that emotional intelligence can be learned and improved at any age. In fact, data shows that, on average, people's emotional intelligence tends to increase as they age. But the specific leadership competencies that are based on emotional intelligence don't necessarily come through life experience. For example, one of the most common complaints I hear about leaders, particularly newly promoted ones, is that they lack empathy. The problem is that they were promoted because they were outstanding individual performers, and being a solo achiever doesn't teach you the skills necessary to understand other people's concerns. Leaders who are motivated to improve their emotional intelligence can do so if they're given the right information, guidance, and support. The information they need is a candid assessment of their strengths and limitations from people who know them well and whose opinions they trust. The guidance they need is a specific developmental plan that uses naturally occurring workplace encounters as the laboratory for learning. The support they need is someone to talk to as they practice how to handle different situations, what to do when they've blown it, and how to learn from those setbacks. If leaders cultivate these resources and practice continually, they can develop specific emotional intelligence skills that will last for years. 5 components of emotional intelligence. In 1998, in what has become one of HBR's most enduring articles, What Makes a Leader, Daniel Goleman introduced a framework of 5 components of emotional intelligence that allow individuals to recognize, connect with, and learn from their own and other people's mental states, as well as their hallmarks. While there are many frameworks offering varying sets of EI competencies, and other models that conceive of emotional intelligence not as a set of competencies but rather as the ability to abstract and problem-solve in the emotional domain, Goleman's approach, outlined in Exhibit 1, can be a helpful way to start building an understanding of emotional intelligence. Exhibit 1. EI component, self-awareness. Definition: knowing one's emotions, strengths, weaknesses, drives, values, and goals, and their impacts on others. Hallmarks: self-confidence, realistic self-assessment, self-deprecating sense of humor, thirst for constructive criticism. Example: a manager knows tight deadlines bring out the worst in him, so he plans his time to get work done well in advance. EI component, self-regulation. Definition: controlling or redirecting disruptive emotions and impulses. Hallmarks: trustworthiness, integrity, comfort with ambiguity and change. Example: when a team botches a presentation, its leader resists the urge to scream. Instead, she considers possible reasons for the failure, explains the consequences to her team, and explores solutions with them. EI component, motivation. Definition: being driven to achieve for the sake of achievement. Hallmarks: a passion for the work itself and for new challenges. Unflagging energy to improve. Optimism in the face of failure. Example: a portfolio manager at an investment company sees his fund tumble for 3 consecutive quarters. Major clients defect. Instead of blaming external circumstances, she decides to learn from the experience and engineers a turnaround. EI component, empathy. Definition: considering others' feelings, especially when making decisions. Hallmarks: expertise in attracting and retaining talent, ability to develop others, sensitivity to cross-cultural differences. Example: an American consultant and her team pitch a project to a potential client in Japan. Her team interprets the client's silence as disapproval and prepares to leave. The consultant reads the client's body language and senses interest. She continues the meeting, and her team gets the job. EI component, social skill. Definition: managing relationships to move in desired directions. Hallmarks: effectiveness in leading change, persuasiveness, extensive networking, expertise in building and leading teams. Example: a manager wants his company to adopt a better internet strategy. He finds kindred spirits and assembles a de facto team to create a prototype website. He persuades allies in other divisions to fund the company's participation in a relevant convention. His company forms an Internet division and puts him in charge of it. Adapted from What Makes a Leader by Daniel Goleman, originally published in Harvard Business Review, June 2006. Get motivated. Richard Boyatzis is a professor and the chair of the Department of Organizational Behavior at Case Western Reserve University's Weatherhead School of Management in Cleveland. People can develop their emotional intelligence if they really want to, but many managers jump to the conclusion that their complement of emotional intelligence is predetermined. They think, I could never be good at this, so why bother? The central issue isn't a lack of ability to change, it's the lack of motivation to change. Leadership development is not all that different from other areas in which people are trying to change their behaviors. Just look at the treatments for alcoholism, drug addiction, and weight loss. They all require the desire to change. More subtly, they all require a positive rather than a negative motivation. You have to want to change. If you think you'll lose your job because you're not adequately tuned into your employees, you might become determinedly empathetic or compassionate for a time. But change driven by fear or avoidance probably isn't going to last. Change driven by hopes and aspirations, change that's pursued because it's desired, will be more enduring. There's no such thing as having too much emotional intelligence. But there is a danger in being preoccupied with or overusing one aspect of it. For example, if you overemphasize the emotional intelligence competencies of initiative or achievement, you'll always be changing things at your company. Nobody would know what you were going to do next, which would be quite destabilizing for the organization. If you overuse empathy, you might never fire anybody. If you overuse teamwork, you might never build diversity or listen to a lone voice. Balance is essential. Train the gifted. Elhanan Goldberg is a clinical professor of neurology at New York University School of Medicine and the director of the Institute of Neuropsychology and Cognitive Performance in New York. In the past, neuropsychologists were mostly concerned with cognitive impairment. Today, they are increasingly interested in the biological underpinnings of cognitive differences in people without impairments, including differences in people's emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence can be learned to a degree. It's like mathematical or musical ability. Can you become a musician if you lack natural aptitude? Yes, you can if you take lessons and practice enough. But will you ever be a Mozart? Probably not. In the same way, emotional intelligence develops through a combination of biological endowment and training. And people who don't have that endowment probably won't become deeply emotionally intelligent just through training. Trying to drum emotional intelligence into someone with no aptitude for it is an exercise in futility. I believe the best way to get emotionally intelligent leaders is to select for people who already show the basic qualities you want. Think about it. That's how athletic coaches operate. They don't just work with anyone who wants to play a sport. They train the naturally gifted. Business managers should do the same. How do you identify the naturally gifted? I'd say you have to look for those with a genuine instinctive interest in other people's experiences and mental worlds. It's an absolute prerequisite for developing emotional intelligence. If a manager lacks this interest, maybe your training resources are better directed elsewhere. Seek frank feedback. Andrea Jung is the chair and CEO of Avon Products, which is based in New York. Emotional intelligence is in our DNA here at Avon because relationships are critical at every stage of our business. It starts with the relationships our 4.5 million independent sales reps have with their customers and goes right up through senior management to my office. So the emphasis on emotional intelligence is much greater here than it was at other companies in which I've worked. We incorporate emotional intelligence education into our development training for senior managers, and we factor in emotional intelligence competencies when we evaluate employees' performance. Of all a leader's competencies, emotional and otherwise, self-awareness is the most important. Without it, you can't identify the impact you have on others. Self-awareness is very important for me as CEO. At my level, few people are willing to tell me the things that are hardest to hear. We have a CEO Advisory Council, 10 people chosen each year from Avon offices throughout the world, and they tell me the good, the bad, and the ugly about the company. Anything can be said. It helps keep me connected to what people really think and how my actions affect them. I also rely on my children for honest appraisals. You can get a huge dose of reality by seeing yourself through your children's eyes, noticing the ways they react to and reflect what you say and do. My kids are part of my 360-degree feedback. They're the most honest of all. I grew up in a very traditional Chinese family. My parents were concerned that the way I'd been raised, submissive, caring, and averse to conflict, would hinder my ability to succeed in the Fortune 500 environment. They were afraid I couldn't make the tough decisions. But I've learned how to be empathetic and still make hard decisions that are right for the company. These are not incompatible abilities. When Avon has had to close plants, for example, I've tried to act with compassion for the people involved. And I've gotten letters from some of the associates who were affected, expressing sadness, but also saying thanks for the fair treatment. Leaders' use of emotional intelligence when making tough decisions is important to their success and to the success of their organizations. Engage your demons. David Gergen directs the Center for Public Leadership at Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School of Government in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He served as an advisor to Presidents Nixon, Ford, Reagan, and Clinton. American history suggests not only that emotional intelligence is an indispensable ingredient of political leadership, but also that it can be enhanced through sustained effort. George Washington had to work hard to control his fiery temper before he became a role model for the Republic, and Abraham Lincoln had to overcome deep melancholia to display the brave and warm countenance that made him a magnet for others. Franklin Delano Roosevelt provides an even more graphic example. In his early adult years, FDR seemed carefree and condescending. Then at 39, he was stricken with polio. By most accounts, he transformed himself over the next 7 years of struggle into a leader of empathy, patience, and keen self-awareness. Richard Nixon thought he might transform himself through his own years in the wilderness, and he did make progress. But he could never fully control his demons, and they eventually brought him down. Bill Clinton, too, struggled for self-mastery and made progress, but he could not fully close the cracks in his character, and he paid a stiff price. Not all people succeed, then, in achieving self-awareness and self-control. What we have been told since the time of the Greeks is that every leader must try to control his own passions before he can hope to command the passions of others. Best-selling author Rabbi Harold Kushner argues persuasively that the elements of selfishness and aggression that are in most of us, and our struggles to overcome them, are exactly what make for better leadership. In Living a Life That Matters, Kushner writes of the personal torments of leaders from Jacob, who wrestled all night with an angel, to Martin Luther King, Jr., who tried to cleanse himself of weakness even as he cleansed the nation's soul. Good people do bad things, Kushner concludes. If they weren't mightily tempted by their Yetzer Hara, will to do evil, they might not be capable of the mightily good things they do. Find your voice. William George is the former chairman and CEO of Medtronic, a medical technology company in Minneapolis. Authentic leadership begins with self-awareness, or knowing yourself deeply. Self-awareness is not a trait you were born with, but a capacity you develop throughout your lifetime. It's your understanding of your strengths and weaknesses, your purpose in life, your values and motivations, and how and why you respond to situations in a particular way. It requires a great deal of introspection and the ability to internalize feedback from others. No one is born a leader. We have to consciously develop into the leader we want to become. It takes many years of hard work and the ability to learn from extreme difficulties and disappointments. But in their scramble to get ahead, many would-be leaders attempt to skip this crucial developmental stage. Some of these people do get to the top of companies through sheer determination and aggressiveness. However, when they finally reach the leader's chair, they can be very destructive because they haven't focused on the hard work of personal development. To mask their inadequacies, these leaders tend to close themselves off, cultivating an image or persona rather than opening up to others. They often adopt the styles of other leaders they have observed. Leaders who are driven to achieve by shortcomings in their character, for example, or a desire for self-aggrandizement, may take inordinate risks on behalf of the organization. They may even come to believe they are so important that they place their interests above those of the organization. Self-awareness and other emotional intelligence skills come naturally to some, less so to others, but these skills can be learned. One of the techniques I have found most useful in gaining deeper self-awareness is meditation. In 1975, my wife dragged me, kicking and screaming, to a weekend course in transcendental meditation. I have meditated 20 minutes twice a day ever since. Meditation makes me calmer, more focused, and better able to discern what's really important. Leaders, by the very nature of their positions, are under extreme pressure to keep up with the many voices clamoring for their attention. Indeed, many leaders lose their way. It is only through a deep self-awareness that you can find your inner voice and listen to it. Know the score. Michael Tilson Thomas is the music director of the San Francisco Symphony. A conductor's authority rests on two things: the orchestra's confidence in the conductor's insightful knowledge of the whole score, and the orchestra's faith in the conductor's good heart, which seeks to inspire everyone to make music that is excellent, generous, and sincere. Old-school conductors liked to hold the lead in their hands at all times. I do not. Sometimes I lead. Other times I'll say, "Violas, I'm giving you the lead. Listen to one another and find your way with this phrase." I'm not trying to drill people military style to play music exactly together. I'm trying to encourage them to play as one, which is a different thing. I'm guiding the performance, but I'm aware that they're executing it. It's their sinews, their heartstrings. I'm there to help them do it in a way that is convincing and natural for them, but also a part of the larger design. My approach is to be in tune with the people with whom I'm working. If I'm conducting an ensemble for the first time, I will relate what I want them to do to the great things they've already done. If I'm conducting my own orchestra, I can see in the musicians' bodies and faces how they're feeling that day, and it becomes very clear who may need encouragement and who may need cautioning. The objectivity and perspective I have as the only person who is just listening is a powerful thing. I try to use this perspective to help the ensemble reach its goals. Keep it honest. Carol Bartz is the chairman, president, and CEO of Autodesk, a design software and digital content company in San Rafael, California. A friend needed to take a 6-month assignment in a different part of the country. She had an ancient, ill, balding, but beloved dog that she could not take with her. Her choices boiled down to boarding the poor animal at enormous expense or putting it out of its obvious misery. Friends said, "Board the dog," though behind my friend's back they ridiculed that option. She asked me what I thought, and I told her, kindly but clearly, that I thought she should have the dog put to sleep rather than spend her money keeping it in an environment where it would be miserable and perhaps die anyway. My friend was furious with me for saying this. She boarded the dog and went away on her assignment.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?